Alright, what is up, everybody? Mark the Hero here, and today, as you can see right here, I have 3 decks right in front of me. And every single one of them are pretty strong. I've dueled the one to the right the most, well, only a couple of times, and I still got beat. And this was just my main starting deck. However, this card here, which I'm hoping to get Necro Valley because I really want that card to go well with this one. But this one here is the Gravekeeper's Priestess, which is why this one runs along with the most terrifying Fiend Mummy deck, whatever you want to call it. And that one I would just call it my cursed deck because, well, curses are pretty creepy. So there's that. So anywho, today I'm gonna teach you guys how to build a deck, especially with some of the structure decks you can easily get. So I'm gonna point the camera facing me. All right. So when I first got into this game, I had no idea on how to build a deck until I pretty much used my imagination and eventually came up with something like this. My favorite deck. Anywho, sorry, I'm still a bit tired because I woke up really early in the morning, decided to go out for a walk to the store. So, anywho, yeah, I don't think you guys want to care about that, but I should watch what I say, huh? Alright, so the first thing that you would want to acquire is mainly a kind of a well-built structure deck. Because if you don't have a structure deck, then the entire creation of the cards that you wanted to build into this, either to play somebody or just to collect. I know there's a lot of collectors out there, and most of them, I'm pretty sure, used a structure deck to build them, which to me is a very, really, really good strategy and a really good idea to start out with, because you can easily buy these off Amazon for less than $10 probably. Like I said, I'm tired. I apologize, but anywho, so the first thing is about creating a deck is you have to first think of like what kind of theme, what kind of person are you to have a theme that can fit a deck of cards, and what kind of imagination do you have with building a deck like this. Because see, my imagination when I first decided to get back into this card game was that I remembered of seeing all these cool monsters as a kid, and seeing seeing some that weren't even close to the anime, because I used to play people who had no idea on how to use the deck that they built. So I kind of built this one because this one worked out for me pretty well. And the first thing that I ended up wanting to have was some field spell cards, because field spell cards, they come in handy. And I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, and they had there was like so many different decks that always had like terraforming, which allows you to play any field spell from your deck. And depending on what kind of deck you run, and like I said, to the collection experts and to the dueling experts, I'm pretty sure, and I hope that you can correct me on most of this, but this always came in pretty handy, because not only can you pull out a field spell, this is like a free freaking token right here. And to me, a free token is like 5 cents, or no, not even 5 cents, a freaking quarter to get a gumball out of a machine. But this card is one good card. It's one of the best cards I've ever had, honestly. But it can also, because of that ability, it can also be good if you are running like a cyber deck. I run Cyanite Universe because I have Link monsters in my deck, and because my deck is more centered around, more or least so, of Cybers. I guess Cybers, Dragon, and Worm. So a worm, basically a worm Cybers, a Cybers worm deck. Even though most of these cards, I kind of wonder, do they really look like dragons? But anywho, before I get into the extra deck, we're going to talk about the fundamentals of having field spells. Field spells would pretty much allow you to gain more, like, it's basically a boost for all your monsters, you know? And, you know, it came in pretty handy for me when I decided to just basically duel every single deck and see what strategies could I use to play every single one. First, I'm not gonna. I wouldn't know what deck the person uses. Neither do I know the deck that they, or the hand that they have first play, because first play you don't know what can happen if you play wrong. Okay, you were pretty much setting yourself up for failure at this point. But one also good thing that I love about this deck, besides of having a pretty good possibility of getting a Link monster, is also a tuner. Yeah, a tuner. See, the tuner allows you to synchro summon some pretty good monsters. And this is also kind of a token to me because it's like reaching a power beyond the two monsters that you would play on the field. And it's just like, it's like evolution, basically. So that's the one good thing about this, is having a tuner. Okay. There are so many good tuners over the internet, and most of them, if you are trying to make a bigger dragon, or I don't know, something powerful, godlike, I suggest this and these two. These two right here. These two little guys right there. I suggest those. Anywho, then one of the other reasons why I would run with Cybers in my deck is because, you know, Cybers, I've never ran it before. I've never even learned how to play it. Okay? All I mostly learned was from what the anime told me, and somewhat of an experience from when I played when I was younger. But Bitron, man, I love this card. Honestly, to most people, I pretty much suck at this point because majority of my strategies are pretty easy to figure out, but pretty hard to pull off. However, unless you know how to play chess or games that are kind of I guess, connected to or related to Yu-Gi-Oh, is, and yes, I do mean Pokemon. Because you know what? Yeah, it's good for breeding, this and all that. I'm not getting into any of that because this is an entirely different episode of me making a deck of cards that I could use to beat my opponent. So, the reason why I'm relating that to Pokemon is because, for one, every single card that I have in this deck is either 4, 5, oh, probably six. All Most of them are either below or above, but I use the unique abilities that they have because these cards are pretty much they're it's pretty good. And like what's really interesting about these two cards, or these four to be exact, is because these are basically part of a structure that I had thought about when I wanted to run this deck. And even though I still want to play against people with this, I kind of want to see how far I can go with this deck. Because, there's a lot of good cards out there, and there's a lot of people who are really after some really good cards. And I know most of the people who play in tournaments would most likely know exactly which ones that they would want to get. It's in order to build pretty much a freaking masterpiece in art. Despite all the other fundamental stuff, it's a work of art. It's imagination. It's everything to you. So you should always have something that's kind of like a free token. And because most of the structure decks that I usually built these off of have a certain appeal to it, because this one right here, this deck beat entirely this one. Why? Because, like I said, a field spell is always a pretty good free token, especially when you're running monsters that are pretty low level. Because sometimes, and I've seen people play this when I was little, and what this card pretty much, this is Malefic World. And I know this is similarly off topic to the reason why I'm teaching you guys how to build a deck like this, but there's a lot of good strategies with field spells, and most of these are actually pretty neat. When I first got into it, I didn't know how to play it. Neither did I know what cards to use until I all of a sudden learned most of that from all the animes. But and yes, you can learn some pretty interesting things off of animes. All right, just trust me on. All right, just trust me on that. Anywho, so one of the other parts of having a worm deck as well, since I've already had mentioned that, is that most of them are banned in tournaments. I didn't know that because I didn't really look into them until I decided to just kind of just let my imagination take form of itself, pretty much. And so when I was building it, I thought, you know, in the animes, I'd never seen any of these cards that are pretty much all up on Amazon or any really good card trading companies. Is that every single one of them somehow took a role into the game, and most of them are either in the anime or not. And this card definitely, I love this card. It's so cool and it's so shiny. Shit, it didn't really cost me much, but it plays its part pretty well. And it's pretty cool because every single one of these decks that I built from the ground up was that every single one of them kind of felt like another character pretty much. Like if you were a character in the anime of Yu-Gi-Oh, what kind of deck would you run? What kind of deck would you use to build certain ones like these? What would you want to, I don't know. What kind of theme would you like? Perhaps. And because there's a lot of decks that run worm monsters and field spells and all that, it's like to me it's kind of like a god tier because it pretty freaking powerful. But sometimes the cost of them are pretty hefty, especially on your life points. But I, for one, love every single one of these because I can somehow easily just have the best luck on getting a good hand, because sometimes, yes, in games like these, you have to have really good luck, because one wrong move, you could draw the wrong card and it's over. But this deck was one of the best main ones I've ever created. And like I said, you can literally start these out from structure and just build your way up. It's really easy. And then one of the other parts to an interesting strategy is, how can you build up even higher? Make cards that are seemingly pretty strong and damn near indestructible. See, I'm pretty sure most people know about counters and how to stop that from happening, and ways to protect themselves, and so on and so forth. But this right here, my friend, are the extra deck. Yep, the extra deck. Most decks that were most likely built pretty much had very few of them, or just none, because there's always a strategy around these. I got so many because I decided I wanted to build, a very strong and interesting deck that could potentially put my enemy down quickly, or to have a strong enough defense to where they're indestructible. Yeah, and there's a lot of cards with that in it, but I mostly owe it all to this bad boy. I've introduced him in quite a few videos, but this guy right here, if you have a link monster out on the field or in the graveyard, and you have a special spell card that allows you to fuse with Clock's Bar Toy, it doesn't matter what monster you use. You can use a Cybers monster just to fuse with it and to make him. But there's also a hefty trick to get maybe a Clark Spec toy or another monster perhaps that can fuse into this wonderful being. The freaking strongest card I've ever ran. Okay? The strongest card. Anywho, and what I mean by the trick of playing a Link monster is that, for one, let's say I'm in a duel, and I have these two. There's a 2-lane strategy here. You can either, 1, synchro, or 2, link. And depending on which link card you have and which one you decided to summon, for example, my Clock Spec toy that I was talking so fondly about, because you know what, that card is the best, and it makes up for so much. It really does. So anywho, if you decided to link summon this one right here, this is 2 Cybers monsters. So this one wouldn't really work out, because for one, it has to be a Cybers, and this one's a tuner. Which, where I'm going with this is that if you have 2 of these, and say you had another monster and 1 tuner, this guy, ladies and gentlemen, is the main contribution to the deck. It's like doing math in class, pretty much. And if you think about it like that, this deck could literally become the strongest thing you've ever seen. The one thing you would put so much hope to ever win one duel. And depending on how you play this, it comes in pretty handy, and I love it. Because for one, it's also a worm and it kind of supports the one third of the theme of this deck. And the other part is the 2/3. Okay? 2/3. And the whole third, basically, is XYZ summon. See, before I had any of these, I took a mental note of what kind of cards would actually come in handy if I were to actually duel somebody, but yet not to make it known to the person you're playing. Okay? You don't want to make that known because if you do, it's going to be obvious and they will know how to counter that pretty quickly. So the last part of it is the XYZ portion of the thirds of the decks. Because for one, depending on what ability every single one of these have, for example, this one, if you have a link monster and say you have two level 4 monsters and you decided to you know make something so strong that it can literally stay on the field until the game's completely over. And some of them do have that ability, like this bad boy. If you have the certain cards to make this thing is literally indestructible. It literally stays on the field. This was always my go-to because of the fact that it seems like it's immortal and that it's strong enough to stand its own ground against probably somebody having 9 level 8s decided to XYZ summon and it becomes something pretty strong, which I'm pretty sure there's a card like that out there. But if it's actually properly played right, and if you do have the trap cards, say for the true king, so like if I want to make the true king of all calamities, all I need to do is for one to have a true Draco card, plus say I decided to do this. The best part about having a monster that helps spurt your levels between certain cards like these is that you can pretty much get a good advantage over the opponent. And these guys right here, and him too, I can't forget about him. These guys here are what would make your deck look like a fucking god. Pardon my language, but you literally would become a god. See, the whole trick of having a deck like this is that even the trap cards even have really cool abilities. For example, Cardalas Well. The only reason why I put this at the very end is because if the attack of a monster or monsters you control becomes 0 by card effect and draw 5 cards. So even though that would be my last card, and if I still had a monster reborn, and say if I had a monster that allowed me to draw cards out of the graveyard and resummoning them every single time, which is the absolute worst but the best strategy ever. Because this strategy annoys the hell out of your opponent, but yet it also keeps you alive for that remainder of that duel. And this card right here is the reason why I decided to take it in, because you could draw 5 cards into your hand and say they were all like safer, they're all in the graveyard, and you had 3 monster reborns, 2 Call the Haunted, and this card. You have an entire deck full of monsters in the graveyard, and this card was literally your saving grace right here. This card is what keeps you from losing. It's like a giant shield, but it's the best luck that you have ever. Okay? Ever. Anywho, what I really like about this deck is that it's not like any one of these can take on 3 Egyptian god cards because they're insanely powerful, and yes, I do have one of them. It's in mm, one of my 10 decks. And what I mean by the other 10 is because these, I believe there were 13 to be in total, and yes, I'm still building another deck. And yes, it's a good idea to have a structure deck. And yes, it's a good idea to have extra cards. And one other thing I wanted to mention before I end this video off and before I completely summarize with you about these cards is I didn't know that the other cards, like if they're like your extra cards, like if you put them to the side, I don't know what that entirely means, but I've seen this before for some reason, and I don't know if it is a thing or if it isn't, but I've always seen players have cards like this with their main deck like this, like literally face down like that. And what's cool about it is that it's kind of like a little pouch for you. It's kind of like the extra cards that just, like, say if you wanted to have a Snickers and it's just a magic whoppa kind of card. I don't know if that's even a thing. Like I said, I don't know. I'm I'm a pretty interesting strategist when it comes to this because I basically build my strategies off of the cards that I decide to build, and the ones that are entirely mainly built out of personality, imagination, everything. It's a work of art. So, before I end this video, I wanted to summarize everything about this because I want to make sure that everybody knows this. And so if you ever come to a point where you are building a deck and you don't have any ideas, first thing is if you don't have any ideas on how to build a deck that's pretty good and that can, topple your opponents, is you should always kind of look around the internet, perhaps Amazon, eBay, whatever country you're in or wherever you're from. If there's at any point that you'd want to kind of look around for a decent field spell or a decent card that would help you put together this amazing masterpiece, is that you should always have a card that is your go-to. Okay? I have a go-to. It's this guy. Because I can't fuse without it. So if this card was ever destroyed, I would basically be pretty much useless without it. But unless you know how to play it right, I mean extremely right, oh my dude, you would literally have an easy time with or without it. Okay? So basically, you'd always want to have a field in your structure because field spells are basically your aid, pretty much. And this deck right here, I couldn't have done it from the very first one that I decided to get, which was a 50 card lot. And one of them had the True King of All Calamities, which I was like, oh, okay. So what if I decided to get more card lots and build these? And what if there is a strategy behind it? What if there's a way I can play them and not lose, pretty much? That's pretty much the whole point of it, is not to lose. So, despite the structure and everything you would need within a structure, as far as your trap spells, fields, and good monster cards too, don't go for the ones that are like super powerful, because if you go for the ones that are super powerful and you decided to play them right away, you pretty much screwed yourself, all right? You screwed yourself to the point where you cannot play any other powerful cards, either from your extra deck or from the graveyard, because you decided to use all those extra good cards and get rid of them all, pretty much. So that's why, in my strategy, it's best to have weaker cards, because weaker cards have a better advantage over stronger cards. Why? Because if you have a specific card that has a very interesting effect, and you are trying to say you wanted to summon him because you loved him so much, first you need to figure out how to get him, and when is the best time to play him, and what effects do they have that can prevent my loss. And that answer is all up to you. That answer is all up to you. So, to conclude this video, I want to give a piece of advice, if you do, is that do not, and I mean do not, ever get any cards and don't ever think they're worthless, because they're pretty useful in every single way. And I know a lot of people who I used to know back then. They used to continuously play Yu-Gi-Oh, and I've played it so many times before, even before I met anybody. But just don't forget that they are pretty worth your while, pretty much. If you're deciding to collect, play, I'll probably sell, or I don't know. I wouldn't really give these away, because one day I would love to duel with these, and I would love to see exactly how good these are when it comes to first rated decks and second rated decks. This one, out of my 13, are basically first and second rated. And what I mean by first and second rated decks is that these are super freaking strong. These are literally, this one's just the strongest one I've ever made. Just out of ever. And it's completely destroyed this deck twice. Although I'm still trying to build a strategy on that and trying to figure out how to beat him. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching this video, and thank you for coming to see how to build this deck, because one day, if you ever decide to duel somebody, these cards will definitely do you good, okay? These cards will help you win any duel at any cost. And yes, these are sold amongst every selling platform and in some grocery stores if they haven't already sold out yet. But, I would love to see what people come up with. And I know most people are playing it right now, the Duel Links game. But if you ever want to stick a tune out of the game into real life and try to make your own cards, and want to continue building something pretty cool, then go for it. Because I decided to take interest quite a long while before I decided to continue trying to play it and learn what I can, but it's pretty cool. I love this deck, and I'm pretty sure if I ever decided to duel with it, if I ever decided to take this to a tournament, I know there are ways to play around this and get, and yes, I'd have to get rid of some cards, but there would be some pretty good handy ones that aren't exactly banned and pretty much usable. So, yeah. So thank you for watching this video, guys. If you have any more questions, probably concerns or anything, please let me know. Feel free. And if you're wondering about the other 10 decks, I I could do a video of it. Um, it'll probably take a while because there's so many, and it's a pain to go through all of them. It'll just seem like a movie. But I'm pretty sure I can definitely do that, and hopefully you guys can build a deck your own and become the best duelist of all time. So, and yes, I was pretty excited to make this video because I kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it and just kept wanting to talk about it. But I never did. So, anywho, and yes, it's the best thing I've ever built. So, yeah. Well, anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a good day. Peace.